Darkness. Complete, total, absolute darkness. You don't know where you are. You don't know what time it is. You can't even tell if your eyes are open. You reach out your hand and your knuckles hit a wall. Immediately. 3 inches away. You reach the other direction. Another wall. You try to sit up. Your forehead slams into something solid above you. You are not in a bed. You are not in a room. You are in a box. And here's the thing that should terrify you. You're not alone. On the other side of a thin wire mesh, less than 2 feet from your face, someone is sleeping. You can hear them breathe. Above you, someone else. 40, 50, 60 people packed into a space the size of a parking lot. Now here's the twist. You're not in a prison. You're not in a refugee camp. You're not in some forgotten corner of the developing world. You're in Hong Kong, one of the wealthiest, most technologically advanced, most jaw-droppingly beautiful cities on the face of the planet. And this box you're lying in? This is your apartment. You pay rent for this every single month. Welcome to the Coffin homes of Hong Kong. And trust me, by the time this video is over, you will never look at a city the same way again. Let's set the scene, because you need to understand the scale of the contradiction before any of this makes sense. Hong Kong. Population, 7.5 million people. GDP per capita, one of the top 15 in the world. The skyline looks like someone took Manhattan, turned the contrast up to maximum, and reflected it in a harbor that catches fire at sunset. This city has more skyscrapers over 150 meters tall than New York and Chicago combined. It has more Michelin-starred restaurants per square kilometer than almost anywhere on Earth. There are shopping malls here with their own indoor waterfalls. There are neighborhoods where people spend more on a single dinner than most Hong Kongers earn in a month. And right now, tonight, in the shadow of those towers, tucked behind the neon, hidden in plain sight, 220,000 people will sleep in a space smaller than a parking space. Not 220, not 2,000, 220,000 human beings. That's enough people to fill a major sports stadium twice over, and every single one of them is paying rent for a box they can barely turn over in. This is the story of how that happened. This is the story of who those people are. And this is the story of a system so rigged, so calculated, so brutally efficient at keeping the wrong people poor that once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Stay with me, because this gets darker before it gets honest. You need to understand exactly what we're talking about, because words like small apartment or micro flat, those words are doing a lot of heavy lifting to avoid saying the real thing. So let's be precise. A coffin cubicle is typically between 2 and 4 square meters. Let me give you something to compare that to. The average parking space in a multi-story car park is roughly 8 square meters. Your coffin cubicle is half that. Sometimes less. The dimensions, roughly 1.5 meters wide, 2 meters long. The ceiling above your bed, the gap between the mattress and the plywood above your face is approximately 80 centimeters, 2.5 feet. You cannot sit up without turning sideways. Now imagine that. You wake up. You cannot sit up straight. Every single morning of your life, in your own home, in the city you built with your hands and your labor and your years, you wake up and the first thing the city tells you is, you don't get to sit up straight. Let that sink in for a moment. The rent for one of these spaces runs between 2,000 and 4,000 Hong Kong dollars a month. That sounds almost reasonable until you know what people living here actually earn. Average monthly income? $8,000 to $12,000, sometimes less. So they're handing over 40, 50, sometimes 60% of everything they make for this. Now, the tour. Welcome to your coffin home. Let me walk you through the amenities. Your bedroom is your living room. Your living room is your dining room. Your dining room is your home office. Your home office is your storage unit. All of it, everything happens in the same 2 square meters. The same patch of mattress where you sleep is where you eat your dinner, do your homework, make your phone calls, cry when you've had a bad day, and lie awake staring at the plywood ceiling, wondering how you got here. Your wardrobe? A plastic bag on a hook, and maybe a small box tucked under the mattress if you're lucky. You learn very quickly what you actually need versus what you thought you needed. The city strips you down to essentials, whether you ask for that lesson or not. The bathroom is down the hall, shared, with 18 people on a good day, more on a bad one. There is a schedule taped to the door, a handwritten rota, the ink slightly smudged, and if you miss your window, you wait. You are always waiting for something in a place like this. The kitchen is a shared hot plate on a folding table in a corridor. It is constantly occupied. It is never properly cleaned. The unspoken rules of the hot plate, who cooks when, how long you get, what happens if someone goes over their time, these are the social politics of survival. People have genuine arguments over these things. Real, desperate arguments. Because when you have nothing, what little you do have becomes everything. And the air. Let me tell you about the air. There is one broken fan in the main room that serves as the only ventilation for the entire floor. In summer, the temperature inside one of these places can hit 35 degrees Celsius. 95 Fahrenheit. The smell, I'm not going to pretend this is something you get used to. Mold, sweat, cooking smells from 6 different countries mixing in a space with no airflow. The particular staleness of air that has been breathed and rebreathed by dozens of people with nowhere else to go. In winter, it is damp and cold, and the condensation runs down the wire mesh walls and pools on the mattress if you don't dry it every morning. This is home. And here is the part that will genuinely shake you. People live here for years. Decades, some of them. This isn't a stopgap. This isn't a short-term emergency. For hundreds of thousands of people in Hong Kong, this is just life. I need you to understand something about what I'm about to tell you. These are not statistics. These are not case studies. These are not cautionary tales. These are people, full, complete, complex, brilliant, funny, heartbroken human beings who deserve to be seen as exactly that and nothing less. The first person I want you to meet is Mr. Chan. He is 67 years old. He has the kind of hands that tell you a life story before he says a single word, scarred and calloused from 40 years of construction work. He helped build some of the most recognizable buildings in Hong Kong's skyline, literally, with his hands. He laid tile, welded steel, hung glass on towers that people take photographs of from the harbor. He lived in a foot apartment in Sham Shui Po for 30 years with his wife. By Hong Kong standards, that was a decent life. Modest, but decent. Then his wife died. His son moved to Canada, and the landlord raised the rent. Mr. Chan moved into a Coffin cubicle 11 years ago. He was 56. I want you to sit with that number. 56 years old. 40 years of building the physical city of Hong Kong, and the city he built could not find room for him. He tells people the hardest part isn't the space. He's adapted to the space. The human body is remarkably, depressingly good at adapting. The hardest part is the shame. Every morning at 5 a.m., Mr. Chan leaves his pod. He walks to a small park 3 blocks away. He does Tai Chi for an hour, the same routine he has done since he was 25. And he says, quietly, that it is the only hour of every day when he feels like a full-size person. 1 hour out of 24. That is what this city has left him. 1 in 3 people living in cage homes in Hong Kong are over the age of 60. Let's move on, because I need you to keep pace with me here, and this story gets more complicated before it gets cleaner. The second person is Mira, 28 years old, from Nepal. She came to Hong Kong 7 years ago because the math was simple and brutal. The money she could earn here, even in the lowest paying jobs, was still more than she could make at home. Her mother needs dialysis 3 times a week. Her younger brother needs school fees. The math left her no choice. She works as a care assistant. Long shifts, night shifts. She comes home in the dark and sleeps through the morning and gets up and does it again. After rent, after transport, after food, after the money she sends home, she has almost nothing left. The pod is not a lifestyle choice. The pod is a mathematical outcome. She jokes, and I want you to notice that she jokes about this, because humor is how people survive things that aren't funny. She jokes that she knows her cubicle's exact dimensions by feel, because she has hit her head on the ceiling so many times she's lost count. She shares a bathroom with 22 people. Over time, she has calculated with impressive precision that the bathroom is available and unoccupied for exactly 8 minutes between 6:03 and 6:11 a.m. on weekdays. She has built her entire morning routine around that window. 7-minute shower. 1 minute to breathe. She shows me her phone. The wallpaper is her daughter, back in Nepal. Bright eyes. She holds the phone like it is the most valuable thing she owns, and in a very real sense, it is. She wants to be a doctor, Mira tells me. She says it with the kind of certainty that doesn't leave room for doubt. So, I work. That's it. That's the whole sentence. So I work. An estimated 370,000 foreign domestic and care workers live in Hong Kong. Many face severe housing restrictions. Many end up in situations far worse than the one I've just described. Mira's story is not the exception. It is closer to the rule. The third person is Tommy, 22 years old. He grew up in a public housing estate in Tuen Mun, one of the government-built blocks that Hong Kong constructed to house working-class families in the decades after World War II. It wasn't glamorous, but it had walls, a real kitchen, windows that opened onto sky rather than concrete. Then his parents' marriage fell apart. His mother took in a new partner. The flat suddenly had too many people in it and not enough room for everyone's pain. Tommy was 16 years old when he realized, slowly and then all at once, that there was no longer space for him there. He found his pod on a notice board at his school. He moved in 2 weeks after his 16th birthday. He is now 22. He has been living in a cage home for 6 years. He works part-time at a convenience store. He studies accounting at a community college. He pays his own rent. He does his homework on a laptop balanced on his knees, the screen the only light in his pod, his curtain pulled shut, headphones on, trying to drown out the world just long enough to think. I ask him, what's the hardest thing about studying in a place like this? He doesn't answer immediately. He thinks about it carefully, the way people do when they've never been asked the right question before. Then he says, I can't read out loud. I can't pace around when I'm thinking. I can't leave my notes spread out overnight. I have to hold everything inside my head, the ideas, the formulas, the problems, the frustration, because there is literally no room to put any of it down. I think about that for a long time afterward. The cognitive load of poverty, having to carry everything in your mind because there's no physical space to externalize your thoughts. That's not just inconvenient. That is a structural disadvantage built into the square footage of your life. Tommy is studying to build a better future for himself inside a system that is actively making that harder by giving him nowhere to think. 1 in 5 young adults aged 18 to 29 in Hong Kong cannot afford to live independently. 3 different people, 3 different lives, and what connects them is not weakness, or failure, or bad luck. What connects them is the city. The choices the city made. The choices the city keeps making. Now we get to the part that should make you genuinely angry. Because what I'm about to show you is not a tragedy. A tragedy is an accident. This is not an accident. This is architecture. This is a system designed, maintained, and continuously protected by people with very specific interests in keeping things exactly as they are. Are you ready? Stay with me. Because this is where it gets dark. Fact, 70% of Hong Kong's land is undeveloped. 70%. Hills, countryside, nature reserves, protected green belt. The land is there. It exists. You can hike on it on a Sunday. You can see it from the window of your flight into Chek Lap Kok. Hong Kong's housing crisis is not a crisis of space. It is a crisis of political will. Now let's go back in time. Because this story starts long before the Coffin homes. When Britain colonized Hong Kong in 1842, the colonial government did something that seems obscure, but has shaped every single thing that followed. They declared all land to be property of the Crown. Not the people, the Crown, the government. Private individuals and companies couldn't own land outright, they could only lease it from the government. And those lease sales became one of the government's primary sources of revenue. The city's finances were built, from the very beginning, on selling and reselling the right to exist in it. After 1997, when Hong Kong was handed back to China, the Hong Kong SAR government inherited this model wholesale. And here is the trap it created. If land prices fall, government revenue collapses. If government revenue collapses, public services collapse. If public services collapse, the political consequences are catastrophic. So the government has a structural financial incentive baked into the very DNA of how it pays for everything to keep land prices high, to limit supply, to protect the value of the existing market. And here's who else has that incentive. Hong Kong's top 4 real estate conglomerates control approximately 40% of all private residential land in the territory. 40% in the hands of 4 companies. These same companies have representatives on government advisory boards. These same companies have had family members in senior government positions. The relationship between Hong Kong's political class and its property class is not a conspiracy. It's just how the city works, has always worked, was designed to work. In 2021, a 5 to 100 square foot flat in Sham Shui Po, one of Hong Kong's poorest and most densely packed neighborhoods, cost more than a 3-bedroom house in most American cities. And then there's the waiting list. Hong Kong has a public rental housing system that is supposed to provide lower-income residents with affordable places to live. It is, on paper, one of the more ambitious social housing programs in Asia. The current average waiting time to get a public housing flat, 6.1 years. 6 years. And counting. There are elderly residents who applied for public housing when they were in their 60s and died on the waiting list before their number came up. That happened. That keeps happening. There are currently 220,000 people on that list. The government builds approximately 20,000 public units per year. Even if not a single new person applied, even if the list froze completely right now, it would take over a decade to clear the backlog. But of course, new people are applying every day, because the city keeps growing, and the rents keep rising, and the pods keep filling up. Now, the penthouse. On the Peak, Hong Kong's most exclusive residential neighborhood, a 4,000 square foot penthouse recently sold for the equivalent of $58 million US. That works out to roughly $14,500 per square foot. 6 kilometers away, in Sham Shui Po, a family of 3 lives in 120 square feet. Same city, same sky, same harbor in the distance. The people in that tiny flat are probably the people who clean the corridors of the building that contains the penthouse. They're the security guards who stand in the lobby. They're the delivery drivers who bring the groceries. They're the invisible infrastructure of luxury right there, holding up the whole shining tower, and the city cannot find room for them. Hong Kong's Gini coefficient is 0.539. It is one of the highest measures of income inequality in the entire developed world. This is not an accident. This is policy. This is choices, made deliberately, over decades, by people who benefited from those choices. And the people paying the price sleep in wire cages 2 feet from each other's faces. But here's the thing about Hong Kong, and I mean this. This city does not go quietly. There are architects, some of them young, some of them who grew up in these very buildings designing modular micro-housing that actually works, not coffin pods, dressed up in better lighting. Real human-scale design. Units that maximize every square centimeter through collapsible walls, shared communal spaces, built-in storage, natural light, proof that small doesn't have to mean degrading, that density doesn't have to mean suffering. There are NGOs walking these buildings floor by floor with tape measures and clipboards and cameras, documenting every cage, every violation, every human being squeezed into a space that shouldn't legally exist. Building a database, creating a record, making it impossible to look away. There are social workers who know every family on every floor of every subdivided building in Sham Shui Po by name, who show up when the landlord suddenly raises the rent by 30% with 2 days' notice, who sit with elderly residents who have nobody else, who fight individual battles inside a system that wins by attrition because they know that individual battles are how you eventually shift the line. In 2022, the Hong Kong government announced a light public housing program, prefabricated temporary flats to be assembled quickly, cutting wait times for permanent public housing. Target: 30,000 units by 2027. Critics called it a band-aid, and mathematically, their right 30,000 units for a waiting list of 220,000 is barely a dent. But the people on that list don't have the luxury of dismissing it. 30,000 units means 30,000 families who get to sleep in a room with a real door. 30,000 families who get to cook a meal in a kitchen that belongs to them. You don't tell someone waiting 6 years for a glass of water that the glass is too small. But yes, it is too small. Yes, more is needed. Yes, the fundamental structure of Hong Kong's land economy, the engine that keeps driving prices upward and people downward, that engine needs to be addressed. Not managed, addressed. Now, I want to tell you something that doesn't fit the narrative you expected from this video. The people inside the Coffin homes are not what the city tells you they are. They are not defeated. They are not broken. They are not waiting to be rescued. They are doing the most extraordinary things in the most impossible conditions. They are cooking elaborate, beautiful meals on a single burner, 5-dish dinners in a corridor the size of a hallway. They are raising children with fierce love and clear ambition in spaces the size of a van. They are celebrating birthdays with decorations strung from wire mesh. They are studying for professional qualifications with textbooks balanced on their knees. They are building community in buildings that were designed to atomize people. They are human beings doing what human beings do when the world refuses to make room for them. They make their own room. They insist on themselves. The resilience is real. I don't say that to make you feel better. I say it because it's true, and because it deserves to be seen clearly, not softened into inspiration, not used to let the system off the hook. The resilience is real, and it should not be necessary. I need to tell you something now that took me a while to fully process. The cage homes are not disappearing, they are evolving. Follow me here, because this is the part of the story that, once you see it, changes how you look at cities forever. In recent years, housing regulators and fire safety inspectors have been cracking down on some of the worst subdivided flats and cage homes, conducting raids, issuing citations, ordering landlords to remediate or shut down non-compliant properties. Good news, right? Here's what's actually happening. The same properties, the same buildings, sometimes the same floors, the same physical walls are being renovated. New lighting is installed. The wire mesh is replaced with plasterboard. A small kitchen unit is bolted in. The whole thing gets a photo shoot. And then it goes back on the market. Relisted. New name, new framing. Micro living studio. Urban efficiency flat. Compact city pad. Smart space apartment. The language is smooth and modern, and whispers of Silicon Valley and minimalism, and a lifestyle choice made by young urban professionals who've read too many articles about the joy of owning fewer things. The reality? Same 80-centimeter ceiling. Same concrete wall outside the window. Same shared bathroom down the hall, although now it's a shared amenity. Same square footage that would not legally qualify as a habitable room in most developed countries. Same box, new branding, and the rent? The rent went up, in some cases, significantly. Because now it's aspirational. Now it's design-led compact living. The cage homes didn't go anywhere. They just hired a PR firm. We are almost at the end of this story. And I want to come back to where we started. You. In the dark. Reaching out and hitting walls on every side. For 220,000 people in Hong Kong right now, tonight, as you watch this, that is not a thought experiment. That is not a POV video. That is Tuesday. And I want to ask you something directly, not rhetorically. Actually ask you to sit with it. What does a city owe its people? Not a country, we're not talking about utopia. Not perfect equality, we're not talking about fantasy. Just a city. The physical, actual, concrete, and glass city. What does it owe the people who staff its hospitals and drive its buses and clean its streets and care for its elderly and raise its next generation? Does it owe them enough space to stand up straight? Enough room to sleep without hearing a stranger breathe through the wall? Enough of a kitchen to cook an actual meal? Enough of a home that a child has somewhere to do homework? That's not a lot to ask. That is, by any reasonable measure, the absolute floor. The minimum that separates a city from a warehouse for human labor. Hong Kong has not met that floor for 220,000 of its own people. And Hong Kong is not alone. The Coffin homes of Hong Kong are the extreme end of a spectrum. But that spectrum runs through Tokyo, through Seoul, through London, through New York, through every city where land became an investment before it became a place to live, where the price of a square meter matters more than the person standing on it. This is not just Hong Kong's problem. Hong Kong is just the place where the logic ran all the way to its conclusion and built a wall 2 feet above a mattress and called it a home. The people in this story don't need your pity. Mr. Chan doesn't want it. Mira doesn't have time for it. Tommy would probably politely decline. What they need is for the city and the system, and the people who have the power to change that system to decide that they matter, that their square footage matters, that their ceiling height matters, that a human being's right to stand up in their own home is not a luxury item. Share this video. Not for the algorithm, not for the views, but because the first move in changing something is making it impossible to pretend you didn't know it existed.